Supreme Court is allowing a controversial immigration enforcement law in Texas to take effect.
This decision clears the way for Texas to immediately begin enforcing this controversial immigration law that passed last year.
To argue that SB 4 is not only unconstitutional, but that it challenges the federal government's longstanding power.
They allowed a Texas law known as SB 4 to go into effect while a lower court continues to weigh a lawsuit
in Texas passing a strict new immigration bill. It authorizes police officers to arrest migrants.
The law that's known as SB 4 makes it unlawful to cross the border.
Texas immigration bill. President Joe Biden's administration has declared a Texas immigration bill to be unconstitutional, and the U.S. Supreme Court has once again prevented it from going into effect. SB 4 would give state and local police the authority to detain people who are entering the country illegally from Mexico. It would rank among the strictest state-level immigration laws in the U.S. Since Mr. Biden took office in 2021, a record number of at least 6.3 million migrants have been detained for entering the country illegally. The Supreme Court issued an administrative stay on Monday's decision, which means that SB 4 cannot be put into effect while the Biden administration's and other opponents' emergency appeals are being processed. In a brief ruling, Justice Samuel Alito indicated that the court might consider further action. SB 4 has been halted for the third time by the conservative justice. SB 4 would give local and state police the authority to stop and detain anyone they suspect of being a migrant worker, with the exception of schools, hospitals, and places of worship. Penalties would vary from infractions to crimes, with the possibility of jail time or fines of up to $2,000. The maximum sentence for unlawful re-entry into Texas is 20 years in prison, contingent upon the individual's immigration and criminal background. Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed SB 4 into law in December. It was originally scheduled to take effect on March 5th, but due to an ongoing lawsuit, it was continually postponed. Republican Governor Abbott, who has ties to former President Donald Trump, has made the case time and time again that SB 4 is required to lower the number of migrant crossings and that the Biden administration has not gone far enough in securing the border.
Texas's new immigration law, the measure would allow the state to arrest and jail migrants suspected of entering the U.S. illegally.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed one of the toughest state immigration laws in recent American history on Monday.
By the state to help the federal government deal with the unprecedented migration crisis along the U.S.-Mexico border.
Supreme Court is allowing a controversial immigration enforcement law in Texas to take effect.
The U.S. Department of Justice and the American Civil Liberties Union filed a legal challenge to the law, claiming that SB 4 infringed on federal power to uphold border security. The measure was temporarily banned by a federal judge in Texas at the end of February, citing concerns that it challenged the fundamental notion that the U.S. must regulate immigration with one voice. However, the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, located in New Orleans, postponed that decision, which prompted the Biden administration to submit its emergency plea to the highest court in the country. Prior to the court decision, Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick stated in an interview with Fox News on Monday that the state of Texas is being attacked by immigrants, which is why the law is required. By air, by water, and by land. Millions of people are literally crossing the border, he remarked. In addition, he called the migrants an organized militia in essence and a hostile group. The Mexican-American Legislative Caucus of the Texas House applauded the decision on Monday. It stated that millions of mixed-status Texan families can breathe a sigh of relief. Prior to the election in November 2024, polls indicate that voters in the U.S. are becoming more concerned about immigration and the border between the U.S. and Mexico. According to a Gallup poll conducted in late February, far more Americans, nearly 30%, than those who feel the government, the economy, or inflation are the nation's top three issues.
This decision clears the way for Texas to immediately begin enforcing this controversial immigration law that passed last year.
It allows police to arrest migrants suspected of crossing the border illegally.
Time you apply a consequence to a violation of law, you see the number of illegal border crossers drop exponentially.
State law enforcement has the power to arrest people accused of crossing the southern border illegally.
Legal battle over. Texas's chief legal representative informed a federal appeals court on Wednesday that the state could have gone too far in crafting SB 4, the state's much-discussed immigration enforcement statute. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals hearing on Wednesday morning was the most recent exchange in the ongoing back and forth regarding the measure between the state of Texas and the Biden administration. Texas Solicitor General Aaron Nielsen stated that the state is still within its rights to pass the legislation to secure the border and the rest of the state in spite of that concession. During the oral arguments on Wednesday, he stated, "What Texas has done here is they have looked at the Supreme Court's precedent and they have tried to develop a statute that goes up to the line of Supreme Court precedent but allows Texas to protect the border." To be fair, Texas could have gone too far, and that is the matter that this court will have to resolve. The same judges agreed last month by a vote of 2-1 to put the law on hold while the legal dispute is resolved. According to Nielsen, the ruling was partially predicated on inaccurate factual premises on the intended operation of the law. Nielsen notably emphasized the judge's decision that SB 4's clause permitting local judges to order an immigrant to return to Mexico violates the exclusive jurisdiction of the federal government to enforce immigration laws.
Specifically in Texas, where state authorities may now arrest and prosecute migrants suspected of crossing illegally.
To argue that SB 4 is not only unconstitutional, but that it challenges the federal government's longstanding power.
A committee of the Texas House took up a controversial bill that would make illegally crossing the border a state crime.
And that Texas does not have the authority to essentially deport people back to Mexico and also to arrest migrants for.
According to Nielsen, Texas transfers immigrants to the federal government rather than deporting them in accordance with SB 4. They are brought to the port of entry by Texas. After that, the U.S. makes the final decision, he contended. Nielsen added that if migrants are denied entry into Mexico, Texas will not detain them in the future. He informed Chief Circuit Judge Priscilla Richmond the law says that an alien must refuse to comply with the order, which would not be the case if the U.S. or Mexico says no. Judge Andrew Oldham, a former general counsel for Governor Greg Abbott, voted against last month's decision that blocked the bill. He questioned Biden administration lawyers repeatedly on Wednesday on their reliance on a 2012 U.S. Supreme Court ruling which Oldham claimed did not accomplish the goal of the federal government, which is to halt a law before it becomes operative. The U.S. Supreme Court said in that Arizona case that immigration enforcement was primarily under the jurisdiction of the federal government, but that the statute mandating police officers to ask about a person's legal status could remain in effect. Oldham remarked, "Everyone in the courtroom, including me, agrees that Arizona is your best case, and in that instance, they did not provide you with what you requested. They did not grant you field preemption over all provisions of laws established by legislatures of sovereign states prior to their being operative and being applied to anybody. It's unclear when the judges panel will make a decision after failing to reach a decision on Wednesday."
Said that this law may well have gone too far, and that is certainly what the Biden administration has argued.
They allowed a Texas law known as SB 4 to go into effect while a lower court continues to weigh a lawsuit.
The law that's known as SB 4 makes it unlawful to cross the border.
Understanding SB 4. SB 4, passed by Texas's Republican-controlled legislature in late 2023, is a contentious immigration enforcement statute that permits local and state law enforcement officers to arrest individuals suspected of being in the country illegally. Under SB 4, a first offense is classified as a misdemeanor, escalating to a felony for repeat offenses. Additionally, the law empowers local judges, irrespective of their expertise in immigration matters, to order migrants to return to Mexico, regardless of their nationality. This provision has drawn criticism from Mexico's government, which has expressed opposition to the law and stated its refusal to accept foreign nationals deported under it. The rationale behind SB 4, according to Texas Republicans who support the legislation, is the surge in unauthorized crossings into the country since President Biden's election. They argue that if the federal government fails to fulfill its immigration enforcement duties, Texas has the right to intervene. However, opponents of SB 4, including the Biden administration, El Paso County, and advocacy groups such as Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center and American Gateways, contend that the law will inevitably lead to racial profiling. Despite its passage, SB 4 currently cannot be enforced due to legal challenges. A 3-judge panel, having previously decided in a 2-1 vote to block the law's implementation, reaffirmed this decision on March 27. The initial blockage stemmed from a ruling by U.S. District Judge David Ezra in late February, who deemed the law likely unconstitutional on the grounds that immigration matters fall within the jurisdiction of the federal government. Judge Ezra's ruling cited the Supremacy Clause and Supreme Court precedent, emphasizing that states may not exercise immigration enforcement powers unless explicitly authorized by the federal government. Furthermore, SB 4 was deemed to conflict with key provisions of federal immigration law, which could detrimentally impact the U.S.'s foreign relations and treaty obligations. Although the fate of SB 4 remains uncertain, pending further legal proceedings, insights gleaned from the three-judge panel's previous decision suggest skepticism towards bolstering state-based immigration enforcement. The timing of the panel's ruling following Wednesday's hearing remains unclear, but legal experts suggest it may arrive earlier than usual due to the panel's prior stance. Regardless of the panel's decision, it's anticipated that the case will eventually reach the U.S. Supreme Court for final adjudication. The legal battle surrounding SB 4 underscores broader tensions surrounding immigration policy in the U.S., reflecting divergent perspectives on federal versus state authority in regulating immigration.
New crimes for simply being present in the United States after having entered through the southern border.
In Texas, passing a strict new immigration bill, it authorizes police officers to arrest migrants.
To empower states to take action to defend themselves. And that is exactly what Texas is doing.
Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, based in New Orleans, is set to decide whether the Texas law is constitutional.
It also highlights the complex interplay between legal principles, diplomatic considerations, and political imperatives in shaping immigration law and enforcement practices. As the legal saga unfolds, stakeholders on all sides continue to await clarity on the future trajectory of SB 4 and its implications for immigration policy and practice in Texas and beyond. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.